They thought the barn was empty. That's what the officers said when they first arrived at the ranch in rural Pine Hollow. Just another collapsed structure baking under the Arkansas sun, until Zeus, Officer Paul Simmons's K9 partner, refused to move. He barked so loud, so long, it echoed like thunder across the dry fields. You don't ignore a bark like that, especially when it's coming from a dog like Zeus. At first, no one took it seriously. The farm had been abandoned for months, maybe years. Grass grew through the cracks of the barn floor. The fence posts leaned like tired old men, and the only footprints in the dust belonged to raccoons and the occasional drunk trespasser. But Zeus was on fire that day. His tail stood rigid, ears pinned, chest rising and falling with each bark that slammed into the silence like a warning bell. Officer Simmons knew something was off. He'd worked with Zeus for 5 years, long enough to tell the difference between alert and alarm. This wasn't a drug scent, this wasn't tracking a fugitive, this was different. Zeus's bark had changed, and that sound, it was trying to say someone is in there. The call had come in around 6:40 a.m. A hiker passing through reported strange noises near an old horse ranch outside county lines. Not the kind of thing that usually merits a unit, but Simmons was already nearby running drills with Zeus and figured they'd swing by. The first 20 minutes were routine. The place looked deserted, no signs of a break-in. The main house was boarded up, the paddocks overgrown. The barn door nearly caved in from wind and weather. But then Zeus pulled hard. He lunged toward the barn, almost yanking Simmons off his feet, tail stiff, nose low, growling under his breath like a low motor. Simmons called for backup. "Something's got him going," he muttered into the radio. Inside the barn, dust floated in golden beams of sunlight cutting through the roof. The smell hit them first. Damp hay, rust, and something else. Something that didn't belong. Zeus's head whipped toward the far corner. He bolted, barking furiously now, scratching at the wooden floorboards. That's when Simmons saw it. Not a door, not a hatch, just a section of dirt and splintered wood that didn't quite match the rest, like someone had tried to patch a hole. Poorly. "Zeus," he said under his breath. "What the hell did you find?" Zeus was never wrong. The dog had tracked missing kids through rainstorms, sniffed out fentanyl in gas tanks, and once found a man's body in a swamp when even the cadaver dogs had given up. He didn't bark without a reason. So when he barked like his life depended on it, Simmons knew to trust him. The barn was about to give up a secret. They got shovels from the truck. The boards came up with minimal resistance. Beneath them, packed dirt, and under that, something else. A hollow sound. Simmons's blood ran cold. They dug faster. Dust and sweat poured down their arms. Zeus paced in tight circles, barking, whining, spinning like a spring wound too tight. And then they hit it, a sheet of plywood nailed down in a makeshift cover. Simmons pried it up and saw the eyes. 4 pairs, wide, sunken, terrified children. Let me pause for a second here. If this kind of story grips you, if it stirs something in your heart, the kind of courage and loyalty only animals seem to understand, then do us a small favor. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Heroes for Animals. Every click helps share these stories of real-life heroism and make sure dogs like Zeus are never forgotten. Now, back to the barn. The children were barely breathing, covered in filth. Their wrists were raw from rope. One of them, no more than 7, was cradling the others like a mother. No words came from their mouths, only whimpers and quiet gasps. Simmons froze. For a second he couldn't even hear Zeus barking anymore. The world had gone quiet. Then training kicked in. He radioed. Dispatch called for medics backup, child services, the National Guard if necessary. He lifted the plywood higher and reached in. One of the kids flinched. Simmons paused, lowered his voice. It's okay. You're safe now. We've got you. Zeus whined beside him. The oldest girl looked at the dog. Her lips trembled. He barked. She whispered. We prayed someone would hear. Later they'd find out the children had been missing for almost 6 weeks, abducted from different counties, brought here, hidden underground. No electricity, no food for days, no light, saved the cracks between boards. They were kept in an old horse stall beneath the barn floor, locked away like something to be forgotten. A man unidentified had been bringing them scraps until 2 weeks prior. Then nothing, no one came back. They would have died except Zeus heard something no one else did and refused to walk away. That tight. Simmons sat in the passenger seat of the ambulance as they drove the children to the hospital. Zeus rode in the back of the cruiser with another officer.
He just wanted his toy. Back at the station, Officer Paul. Simmons sat in the locker room staring at his boots. He hadn't really slept. Not since they'd pulled those kids out of that hole. Their faces kept flashing. In his mind, pale, sunken, trembling. And that little girl, the one who whispered, he barked. We prayed someone would hear. Paul rubbed his eyes. He'd been a cop for nearly 12 years. Seen overdoses, fatal crashes, armed standoffs, even once helped deliver a baby in the back of a minivan. But this was something else. This wasn't just crime. This was evil that had grown roots in silence. And if Zeus hadn't barked, Paul didn't want to finish that thought. Zeus, meanwhile, was eating a cheeseburger, a real one from Buddy's diner. Extra bacon, no bun, just the way he liked it. Paul had driven through the drive-thru on their way back to HQ and told the kid at the window, "You ever make a burger for a hero?" The kid just stared, then gave him an extra milk bone. On the house. Zeus had earned it. By noon, reporters lined the sidewalk. Outside the precinct. They wanted statements, interviews, sound bites. Was it true the children were nearly dead? How did the dog know? Can we film with the canine? Paul stepped outside briefly to talk with them. He was polite, careful with his words. The investigation was ongoing. The man responsible had yet to be identified. But yes, Zeus had led them to the barn. Yes, the children were alive. And no, they weren't ready to talk to the press privately. Paul worried not just about the man who'd taken them, but about the aftermath. The kids didn't need cameras. They needed rest, quiet, safety, and the dog. He just needed his ball. Over the next few days, the case grew stranger. No fingerprints in the barn, no personal items left behind. The truck found in the woods belonged to a man with no prior criminal record. His body was identified through dental records. He had crashed a week earlier, likely trying to flee. The coroner listed the cause as internal bleeding. He'd bled out slowly, alone, unseen. Paul kept thinking, why those kids? Why that place? Detectives dug through hours of missing person reports. 3 of the 4 children had been taken from different towns, all during custody disputes or social service transitions. The 4th, a little boy named Mason, had no clear documentation at all. How the man had gathered them, how he moved them without anyone noticing, it was still a puzzle. But the one thing everyone agreed on, without Zeus, they'd still be down there. Zeus returned to light duty at the department. He was a working dog, but he wasn't just a tool. Paul made sure he got rest, walks, belly rubs from the front desk, clerks, and plenty of treats. From Officer Linda, who'd started keeping peanut butter in her drawer just for him. But something was off. Zeus wasn't barking anymore. Not out of exhaustion, out of heaviness. At night, he lay beside Paul's bed, ears twitching, eyes half open. Sometimes he let out a quiet whine like he was still hearing voices no one else could hear. Paul began to wonder, was this guilt or memory or just the weight of a job no one else could do? A week after the rescue, a town hall was held. The mayor, the sheriff, social workers, and a few state reps showed up. The community wanted answers, and they wanted to honor their heroes. Zeus sat on stage next to Paul wearing a little badge on his harness. The room was packed. Some cried, some clapped, some asked hard questions. How did this happen? How were those children missed? Why didn't someone know? Paul stood and said one thing. I don't have all the answers, but I know this. Our dogs don't lie. They don't get distracted. They don't overlook signs. They don't ignore pain. Maybe we should start learning from them. The room fell silent, and then it erupted in applause. Later that night, as Paul and Zeus drove home, the cruiser smelled faintly of French fries and dog hair. The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the soy fields. Zeus sat in the back seat, tongue out, tired but peaceful. Paul looked at him through the rear view mirror. You know you saved their lives, right? Zeus blinked slowly. Then just once he gave a low, happy bark. The next morning, Paul was drinking coffee when his phone buzzed. It was a message from the hospital. One of the kids, Mason, the quietest, was asking to see Zeus. Paul didn't hesitate. He and Zeus drove over that afternoon. Mason was in a pediatric recovery room, surrounded by stuffed animals and 4 tubes. But when Zeus walked in, tail wagging gently, Mason sat up straighter than he had in days. He didn't say a word. He just reached out, arms trembling, and buried his face in Zeus's neck. And that's when the boy finally cried, not out of fear, but out of relief. Zeus became a regular visitor at the hospital. After that, he wasn't trained as a therapy dog, but no one cared. Kids who hadn't spoken in weeks started smiling. Nurses made room in the schedule just for his visits. It was as if his very presence reminded them, you were found. You are not alone. The barn, meanwhile, had been demolished, not for legal reasons, but because the town decided no child should ever see it again. In its place, the community began building a small memorial garden, a bench, a plaque, some sunflowers, and a statue of a German shepherd with one paw raised. The inscription read, "For those who bark, when others stay silent." That night, Paul sat on his porch, beer in hand, Zeus lying at his feet, the stars above Pine Hollow were clean and endless. Think we did good, buddy? Zeus didn't answer, but he didn't have to. The media had moved on. That was just how it went. One week it was Miracle in the Barn with headlines like K9 Zeus uncovers secret prison beneath abandoned ranch. The next week they were talking about a celebrity breakup and some political scandal on the coast. But for the people in Pine Hollow, the sheriff, the nurses, the neighbors, and especially Officer Paul Simmons, the miracle wasn't over. It was still unfolding. Quietly day by day in the hospital inn, the heart of a boy named Mason. Mason didn't speak much. Not at first. The doctor said it was normal. Trauma does that to kids. It steals their voices, buries them under fear. But Paul noticed something strange. Mason didn't seem afraid of Zeus. In fact, he seemed drawn to him. Whenever the other officers stopped by the hospital, Mason would tense up. He'd look away, shrink down in his bed, like a whisper, afraid to be heard. But when Zeus entered the room, Mason changed. He sat up straighter. His eyes widened. Sometimes he even smiled just a little. It started with small gestures. The first time Mason reached out to pet Zeus, his hand trembled so hard it looked like a leaf in the wind. But Zeus stayed perfectly still, head resting on the mattress, eyes gentle as if to say, "I'm not going anywhere, kid." The second time, Mason took one of Zeus's ears and rubbed it between his fingers. That night, the nurse said, Mason slept without nightmares. On the third visit, Paul pulled out a tennis ball. "Bet you can throw it farther than I can," he joked. Mason didn't laugh, but he did throw the ball. And for the first time, Zeus didn't chase it. He walked over to Mason, nudged the ball back toward him, and waited. Paul watched the two of them play in silence. No commands, no tricks, just trust. The case, meanwhile, wasn't moving as fast as everyone had hoped. The man found in the crashed truck, believed to be the abductor, had no criminal record, no known aliases, no confirmed link to the children. Investigators were digging through burner phone data, credit card transactions, and grainy trail cam footage from the woods where his truck was found. Everything pointed to one horrifying conclusion. This man had operated alone. And worse, he had planned it. The barn had been rigged, reinforced floors, a hidden door under the hay, chains secured with custom locks. Whoever this guy was, he didn't just stumble into evil. He built it. Paul couldn't stop thinking about the timeline. How long had the kids been down there? Why didn't anyone notice? What kind of man watches children starve? One night, Paul sat in the precinct long after hours. He had Zeus at his feet, snoring softly. A stack of files sat untouched in front of him. Testimonies, medical reports, case notes. He didn't open them. He stared at the wall instead at a framed photo of the department's first K-9 from decades back. "Wish you could tell me what he smelled," Paul muttered. Zeus stirred, but didn't wake. Paul knew the truth. It wasn't the scent Zeus had followed. It was something deeper. Vibration. A silence too loud to ignore. Maybe a kind of energy only dogs could sense. Or maybe in the absence of any other voice, the universe spoke through the only one still barking. The next week, Paul and Zeus were invited to the school district's spring assembly. It was awkward at first. Paul wasn't a public speaker. He stood behind the podium, cleared his throat, and tried to be serious, but the microphone squealed, and a second greater sneezed so hard it echoed like a shotgun. Zeus broke the tension. He walked across the stage, sat in front of the mic, and barked once. The kids lost it, cheering, laughing, clapping. And in that room full of teachers and tiny humans, Paul said something simple. Sometimes heroes don't wear badges. Sometimes they don't say anything at all. They just show up and refuse to leave. Mason's progress came slowly. One evening, Paul received a call from the hospital. Mason had spoken. Not a full sentence, just one word. Zeus. That was it. But it was everything. The nurse on duty said he'd been holding Zeus's photo when he said it, whispered it like a secret, then smiled.